Hi everyone, welcome to the Startup Operator podcast. I'm Roshan and today I'll be speaking to Thiyagarajan, who is co-founder of Upekkha. Upekkha is a SaaS accelerator and is evangelizing the concept of Value SaaS. Rajan has been a software developer, product professional before this. He's also a fellow Nassim Taleb fan, so it was really a no-brainer for me to have him on the podcast, and I'm so glad that he graciously agreed. So, welcome Rajan. Thanks so much for making the time.
Thanks, Roshan. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, so we'll begin with a little bit of an introduction. Help us understand some of your career transitions in brief. Beginning as a developer to a product professional, and then founder, and then now working with groups of founders. So, what has that been like?
Right. So when I started out, I used to hear that career is a graph, but my career has been more of a crazy quilt. So I've done many different roles. To get started, I graduated in 2003 from IIIT Hyderabad, right. And I became a developer for about 2 to 3 years as well. First, did a job at Sapient as a developer, as a server-side developer, and then I moved into the mobile space. I worked for a small mobile startup which was building the first video recorder, and that got acquired by KKR. Eventually, now it is part of Aricent. It was a company called Amused. That's where I got involved in mobile developer side of things. And after that, I did my own startup between 2007 and 11. And at that time, I was building something similar to what Periscope is today. That was 4 years of startup life, and that is where I was thrown into the proverbial swimming water as a baby, and I had to learn product management on my own, trying to figure out how to build products. So it was a great fun ride. We had a world-class engineering team, built a great product, had 1.5 million users with zero marketing. It was a good B2C experience. After that, I moved to Intuit. I started out as an innovation guy. Google has this idea of working with engineers to do unstructured projects. So me as an entrepreneur, I was coming in and teaching entrepreneurial skills to engineers. So I spent about 3 years in Intuit doing that, and I shift to product management. 3 years more at Intuit, where I did product management, one of the best places to learn product management. So I had great fun right there. And before I left Intuit, I was the head of product for QuickBooks India. Now, along this journey, I've also been very, very passionate about building products from India to the rest of the world. So I've been involved with a bunch of communities. So I built a community called Mobile Monday for about 6 years. And then I was also part of a motley crew that created NASCOM Product Conclave 2009, and which eventually became the think tank and the brand called Product Nation. So I was involved with them in helping take Indian products to the global scene. I would do bunch of activities related to policy, market making, and playbooks. So I was involved in that. And I spent about 18 months doing a full-time fellowship with that organization I had started. And that time launched a conference called Startup Bridge, which was to help Indian startups get more shots at global M&A. We saw that Israel does 2-digit M&As every year, and India does one single-digit M&A. So we said, how do we take India's tally to this level of Israel? So we take Indian startups and expose them to global corporates to lead to M&As. And that led to a couple of good outcomes. Good M&As happened out of that. For about 3 to 4 years, I did that. And I joined Upekkha as a third co-founder in 2017. Rajan had already started by then, and I joined Upekkha as a third person. And the last 3 years has been working with Upekkha. We work with about 48 startups, helping them in different leg of their journey.
Right. So what was the vision behind starting up Upekkha? How do you work with founders and startups, and what do you really offer to them?
So in my last 10 plus years of experience of being a founder, working with, let's say, at least a couple of hundreds of founders, right? So I've seen that entrepreneurs or founders are shoved into the unicorn path, right? I've actually seen two different pain that I've experienced. I've seen a lot of fellow founders go through that. One is either they're shoved into the unicorn pain path, right? Or the other cases where they have dealt with evil angel investors, right? Where they have given out their soul for a very little investment. Like for about 2 lakh to 20 lakh of investment, they would have given 25 to 40%. And that just restricts anything that they can do, right? So what I realized is that the founders, if they have the ability to stand on their own, if they are able to figure out their own product market fit, and after that they decide to do what to do next in terms of business, that gives things that are more favorable to founders.
But does
And
it
I have,
still, sorry, does it still happen though? I've heard horror stories from 7, 8 years back, right? 12, 13, when, angel investors come in and like, I've seen one person ask for 50% of somebody's startup, right? Um, uh, but does it still happen though? I mean, I thought like, we're a lot more mature at this point of time, right? Because
yeah,
I mean,
so
essentially, if you're hiring, if you're taking away 40% or 50% of somebody's company, then you're hiring an employee, basically.
that's true.
Yeah.
So there are still offers of 2 lakh to 5 lakh of investment for 15% that happens, right? I have seen that like as recent as last month. Like we have companies where they have given away like 25% for 25 lakhs, right? So it has reduced, right? You know, the overall ecosystem has matured. Like India as an ecosystem, a tremendous amount of venture capital that has come in, but most of them is in the later stage. In the angel side, for first-time founders, there is still like a lot of this behavior that goes on. What has changed fundamentally is that many founders who have exited have now become these founder angels, and they are a lot more founder friendly. And there, it never happens, right? So if you're raising from a founder, then it never happens. But if you're raising from a real estate, then it's kind of bound to happen. So that's one part of the story. The other part of the story is that everybody is then pushed to become a unicorn. And in that race, eventually when it reaches to a unicorn or not, the founder is sacrificed. Right? So a meaningful founder outcome doesn't get created. I have seen this. Prasanna worked with close to about 100 startups, my co-founder at Microsoft Accelerator. And he saw that and we said, this has got to be different. And that's where we said that, look, in the SaaS, where there is an advantage for an Indian founder at a global level, right, where you can build things in a predictable way, can we help them get to that product market fit, or as SaaS flywheel revenue that we call? If we give them that independence, after that, let them become bigger. I use this metaphor. I say that everybody is looking for their rocket ship, moonshot, Sachin Tendulkar, right? But at the business plan stage, your startup is like an auto. Right? You can't put rocket fuel in an auto and expect it to become a rocket ship. So first transform from an auto to a Ferrari, and then after that put venture capital. So this whole idea of bootstrapping versus funding is a false dichotomy. You need to use the right capital at the right stage, right? And how do we strengthen somebody to that level to say that, look, I can now take a large amount of venture capital to go become that 100 million ARR business? Or if I realize that I want to build a Basecamp like company, or a Happy Fox like company, then that is an option that I can take, and I don't feel like I'm a failure, right? What happens is many of the merchants of rocket fuel, they market it so well. They say that, if you have to build a business, only build a venture funded business. Right? There are many people who have built Basecamps and Happy Fox and have had like happy founder lives and happy employee lives and happy businesses. So we said, how do we help through our experiences educate founders on what are these meaningful founder outcomes that they can go after, and how can we help them get there? If we get them to about $1 million in ARR in less than $200,000 of any external funding, then let them decide whether they want to raise 18 million more to build the $1 billion TAM market.
Yeah. No, that's a very important point that you bring up. I often feel that, founders, and this could be an engineering bias as well, right? You find a problem and you start solving it without really thinking about what kind of business you want to build, right? Whether you want to build that whole blitzscaling, exponential growth kind of a business, which is essentially a VC funded business, where you're playing the whole valuation game, or do you want to build a profit loss business, maybe 10, 15 of you and your buddies clock a few $1 million in ARR and chill out, right? It's the people who are kind of stuck in between who are who get the shaft, basically, right? So it's a very good. I mean, I would say it's a service to the ecosystem that you're educating people about these options at such an early stage. So
And I would also add a nuance there, right? So the thing that COVID has exposed is that blitzscaling done for blitzscaling sake actually
yeah,
becomes blitzfailing, right? So you have the Reid Hoffman narrative and you have the David Sachs narrative, right?
yeah,
David Sachs of Yammer, he's created a new venture fund. He says that look, blitzscale almost means blitzfail, right?
mm,
And if you look at many valley companies,
mm,
they actually were first about unit economics, then were about scale, right?
mm,
And its entire life, Salesforce did not raise more than $50 million, and it was still able to do, right?
mm,
Once you fix your unit economics and then you find your nonlinear growth lever, then it can become that big. But when you sacrifice unit economics for growth is where the problem comes. And in this chase for like growth at any cost,
mm,
growth without looking at the basics of the business,
mm,
that is where the problem comes. And that's what we internally frame that as saying that there is a vanity way of building SaaS, and then there is a value way of building SaaS. Value way of building SaaS is no compromise on unit economics.
mm.
After you've proven the unit economics, after you build the flywheel revenue, then you step on the gas
Yeah.
pedal on scale.
Yeah, because I think the first thing you have to do as a startup or a founder is find product market fit, right? And a lot of the times I find money just apologizes for bad product or shitty market fit. Really,
Absolutely.
because I mean, if you're going to spend on customer acquisition, you will get customers, right? But the point is to keep them there and is to grow that virtuous cycle, basically, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I remember talking to this one founder who has grown his website traffic by some crazy amount, right? Over the last like 4 or 5 months, and they're spending a shit ton of money on Facebook and Instagram ads. And but I mean, if you look at their organic traffic or if you look at their session length, etc., etc. I mean, incidentally, this was the first time they were even bothering about something like that. It's abysmal, right? So, and then you have this conversation about, hey, what happens when you stop spending on this stuff, right? uh, but yeah, I mean, I think people are getting a lot more mature now, especially in the SaaS ecosystem, where I feel like there are plenty of things working for you, right? If you want to build a profitable business like recurring revenue, you could have negative churn. um, then the fact that you could build for the world, right? You don't really have to be someplace to really deploy all of these things. But I want to pick up on what you briefly mentioned, which is the whole value SaaS and vanity SaaS that you guys talk about often, right? Which I find is a very interesting concept that you are sort of evangelizing. Uh, Draw out some of those distinctions between value SaaS and vanity SaaS and help us understand that a little more in detail.
Sure. So Vanity SaaS is raising $6 million to get to $1 million,
Mhm.
right? Vanity SaaS is not knowing that how would you invest 200K to get to about 1 million, right? Like value SaaS is, like I said, like you will have a uncompromising view of saying that I'll first solve the unit economics, then only grow, right? I know of companies which say that they've raised $18 million and not able to get to their first $1 million in ARR, right? But then there are companies which spend only about less than 500K to be able to get to 700K, right? Or like a million. And then after that, if you decide you want to put more money into that, then it kind of moves forward. I would actually categorize Salesforce into value SaaS, right? Because Salesforce did use a certain amount of capital, but then it was able to eventually break out the business case. Like, I mean, basically every business case, you put $1, you need to get $1 out,
Mm.
right? A vanity SaaS is a business like Domo, which raised $700 million of funding to get to about 100 million in revenue. Right? There is no fun in that.
Yeah.
So the fun fact for like companies based out of India is that I think we almost have no choice, right? Uh, of late we are seeing like there is more like later stage capital that is coming to B2B and SaaS kind of companies, but like if you compare the B2C versus B2B, the amount of funding that goes in, like 95% or 97% goes into B2C, right? Very little go to B2B. So since we have like the scarcity of capital, like all Indian SaaS startups are value SaaS focused, right? And they should leverage it. And whenever they waiver it, that's where they like end up spending a lot more, raise, and then like not get to the business metrics, so to say.
Yeah. So you're not really saying that you should only spend the money that you have, right? I mean, you're saying that you can spend on customer acquisition, but you need to be cognizant of the fact that at some point of time that curve will sort of kick in, and then you will have enough money to basically spend on growth.
Absolutely. So like to get to $1 million, I'm not saying that you will only need 200K. You will have to reinvest your capital. Maybe you'll have to spend 700K to get to $1 million. But you use the 200 to get started, right? You build the revenue and you focus on getting the revenue as opposed to using another metric which is not aligned with revenue and saying that, look, I'm growing on this metric, right? And that's where saying how, like, what is the customer persona that I'm solving for? Do I have a high value problem that I'm looking at? Like it should be at least about $3,000 of annual contract value, even if you're building from India. Right? Are you messaging it right? And do you have a channel where you're able to acquire this customer, where you're able to solve your payback period equation, right? Now, having solved this unit economics, then like pump money on SEM if you have to, and you know that channel is going to give you the growth that you're looking for, right? So like the focus is on that product market fit or unit economics or the flywheel revenue, as you will call, as opposed to saying I'm going to try 3 or 5 different things because I have $4 million in the bank.
Okay, really sorry for the interruption. I'm just going to take a minute to talk about something amazing. Clogo helps your remote teams be more productive by helping them close decisions more faster. I've worked remotely for the last 4 months, and it's just a lot of going back and forth on Slack, on email, on Zoom, etc., but never really getting to a point of execution, right? Well, Clogo makes things a lot more simpler. You can have communication contextually around decisions that you want to make. All you have to do is open a thread on Slack like this and continue to talk about what you want to do. With a set agenda, it could be your product roadmap, it could be a marketing campaign, it could be a support ticket, etc. And once you're done, it all syncs with your Slack, and you have all of these decisions accessible when you need it, where you need it, right? Guys, I've tried this out and it makes you super productive. If you're even remotely interested, I suggest you go to clogo.com, that's CLERGO.com, and check it out for yourself. Cheers. Yeah. And we spoke about product market fit a few different times. We referenced it. We talked about the flywheel. When do you think someone has product market fit? What is the clearest marker for that?
So product market fit, like more and more, I've been like using less of that terminology, right? I feel that product market fit, when Mark Anderson referred to it, it was more suitable for like venture funds to decide whether they need to do double down investment or not. Like if you talk to B2C companies, if you talk to B2B companies, I have seen this, that product market fit is so transient, right? And there is, like, you talk to 100 people, there are 100 definition of product market fit, that it almost becomes very like useless to use that as a marker, right? So for SaaS companies, we say flywheel revenue, right? When do you get a flywheel revenue? Right? When do you get a flywheel revenue is when you're able to establish your negative churn, right? Then it becomes interesting for you as a business to just put about $1 and get $0.1 out of this, right? And flywheel revenue, like if you're in a business where, like, let's say you're focused on SMB and you're not going to see a lot of expansion, but at least you have an inordinate amount of your tofu and your churn, that the tofu minus churn equation is getting taken care of. So when we use the revenue language, right, if we look at negative churn, that is like a clear indication of saying that this is a business, right, that is just going to grow. If you found, like, you just need to tap one channel after another for that particular segment, for that particular value statement. So I've been using more the flywheel language, Roshan, and much less of product market fit, because it keeps like changing. Like some would say that, if you had 20K of revenue, it is product market fit. Some would say if you had 83K of revenue, then it is product market fit. But there are companies I have seen who have $1 million of ARR, but they've spent like literally 3 million to acquire that. Is that product market fit? No, right? Because you've not, like, like how you said earlier, right? If you pay money to customer, the customer will become yours, right? Because you've paid him to come and be your customer, and that's not a business.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree, because the way I look at it, right, product market fit, I've said it before as well, it's kind of a continuous journey. Because every feature you launch, every new market that you expand to, every new industry vertical that you look at, right, you have to go through the journey of, often painful, often frustrating journey of finding that whole product market equation in that particular domain, right? Yeah, the flywheel sounds a little more interesting when you have that whole negative churn as well, right? When either existing customers are expanding around newer additions or features or depth of use, or they're just bringing in a lot more referrals and so on, so that your CAC is sort of getting reduced, right?
It's less debatable for a founder, right, to make decisions, right?
Yeah.
Versus a product market fit, it is an amorphous concept that, like, doesn't give a tool for founder to make decision, like, or for a business owner to make that decision, but it does give a tool for an investor to make the decision. So like I do use the language of product market fit, but I've been constantly like reducing the emphasis on the product market fit language.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways it's a growth inflection point, right? Where you know that, okay,
Absolutely.
if I'm going to put 10x the amount I'm putting right now, I will grow that amount of revenue proportionally, essentially. So, I mean, if we consider Salesforce to be the sort of granddaddy of SaaS businesses, right? We started, I think, in 98 or 99. We've had roughly about 2 decade plus precedence in SaaS. What have we learned about SaaS businesses in this time, and are they also applicable universally? Like, can we sort of use these frameworks in India as well?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I've actually written a blog post on that. Not sure if it is popular enough, but I wrote a blog post called Happy Feet SaaS, where I dug into the history of SaaS, right? So the first SaaS business before Salesforce was there was application services provider, right? And that's where we used to talk about this whole idea of multi-tenant architecture and things like that. And if you go back to Value, many successful, like, yesteryear Indian founders actually built ASP businesses, but none of them took off, right? So in my mind, SaaS is multiple level of like changes that have happened, right? One is at the technology level, where you are able to change the distribution from CD to like over the cloud, and also do this multi-tenant architecture. So in like fun fact, I don't know, Roshan, if you know this, but like SaaS, the original envisioning of SaaS was under DARPA gave out a grant, right, saying that build applications like this, and there were like a couple of folks in 1995 96, they built it. But it, like you said, it eventually became popular in 2003 thanks to Mark Benioff with his no software evangelization, right? So one is the technology architecture of multi-tenancy, which DARPA kind of like initially underwrote, but that did not make the change. If you go back in history, you will see that many investors like went after that, and they didn't make a big difference. But something changed after 2003, and I would credit Google to that. And that is where a buying behavior pattern changed. Like the distribution changed from CD to over the cloud. That was enabled by the technology, but thanks to Google, people changed their purchase pattern from saying, hey, you come into my office, deliver me this CD, versus saying I can go online, search for it, and I can try and experience. So the buying pattern changed from selling to assisted buying. And when that buying pattern changed from selling to assisted buying is where, like, fundamentally SaaS is a market enabled, right? So after that, you could then say, what, like, let me change the business model from you owning the apartment to you having a rent in the apartment, right? That changed the price points. So the buying behavior change and the price point change of saying, instead of me owning a house, instead of me owning a software, instead of me owning a CD, let me pay rent to the software, to the house, right? That business model made affordability. The buying pattern changed, allowed that it didn't matter anymore that you had a salesperson who was going ahead and closing a sale. You could build software anywhere, and you could give a decent enough trial experience, and people would kind of use it. So it didn't matter. Like in the old enterprise world, Rohan, only like heavy duty sales guy would make 100K deals. Right now, thanks to try and buy and then expand or upgrade, that meant that you could get software built in Alabama or Alvarpet in Chennai, and still it will be taken up. Right. So this assisted buying paradigm shift is something that is like not well appreciated, but that was the fundamental change, and that is why I think is helping so many SaaS companies come outside of Silicon Valley, also come out of India.
Yeah, so that's a solid point, right? Because I mean, how software was consumed even 15, 20 years back was somebody went and sold something to this other person some 1,000 miles away, and he or she decided that this was a good idea, and then everyone else had to use that bloody software, right?
And it
And
was horrible.
It was horrible, default horrible. Like I can't imagine. I can't think of one software that I've used that was, decided those many miles away that offered any kind of delight. And here we are, cancel subscription at just the drop of a hat. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean that's
buyers and user became the same, right? Like what you described is where a buyer is not the same as the user. Yeah. So software was built for the buyer, right? So user experience was thrown out of the window. But when it has to be an experience-led product, because the experience is what is going to decide a sale, right? So then like you had to design software for the user because the user was the same as the buyer. That also changed, right? And that's why you see like, the old Oracle expense filing versus Concur or Expensify, like, the difference in experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at Waymo, I mean, we stress on active usage, right? Daily active usage. So that's one of our North Star metrics for product. Right, and it's a very B2C kind of phenomena, but then I mean I see that prevalent across many other startups as well. So if you look at the SaaS journey itself, I mean you sort of split it up into, let's say, 0 to 1 million, 1 to 10 million, which is sort of called the valley of death, and then you have the 10 million plus journey, right? At each of these stages, can you break down what metrics that a founder should aspire for? And what are those playbooks to achieve those metrics? It's a very broad question, so feel free to sort of thread it.
So within Upekkha, we focus in the 100K to 1 million and 1 million to 10 million in terms of startups that we work. But we also have a lot of startups who are in the 0 to 100K, right? And I'm going to make a plug here. I wrote a guidebook last year called Value SaaS Basecamp Guide, and that was like just literally like what we have observed, what I've observed with a lot of founders, documented in terms of what should be the path that you should follow to get to first 100K, right? So there are a couple of quotes that I'm going to pick from there. First is like, it is easy to earn $1 than to earn a rupee, right? This is to re-quote Sridhar Vembu. Right. So first is to fix your geography. And I know Roshan, like Waymo initially started with an India market, then Southeast Asia. Now you're looking at a global market. Like I think one of the things that I say in terms of the history of the SaaS and the software industry is that like I took this dip survey like about year and a half ago, and $650 billion of software revenue gets generated in the world, right? And 25% of that is SaaS, right? And more than 50% of that is North America, right? And 10 years ago, not even 5% of the total software revenue was SaaS, right? So the SaaS as an industry has grown 2 times as faster as the software revenue industry itself, right? Now, why I'm saying all of this is, if you are building a software business, right, you may start in India, but you'll eventually have to go to global. Global means North America, right? So if you start there, then a lot of the challenge of the India market will get taken care of. And that is what Sridhar and like later Girish so beautifully captured in that quote, right? Then like just the basics, right? So in the first, getting to the 10K MRR, pick the right geography, right? Then look for early adopters. Nothing new there. Like all technology businesses focus on early adopters. Now, if you take feedback from non-early adopters, you will get spun around. Right?
You'll build 10 businesses basically.
You'll build 10 businesses, right? You'll build a thali startup, right? And then you need to, if you are SaaS, you have to absolutely follow Christopher Yan's bees, rat, rabbit math. So do your ACV math, right? And focus on getting your first 10 customers, first 30 customers. At first 10, first 30 customers are going to be customers that you're going to do like 10 different things. There is no playbook to that. You're going to call your friend, you're going to call your friend's friend, you're going to write a LinkedIn post and things like that. But one of the things that you want to do is that, like one thing that like experts entrepreneur, repeat SaaS entrepreneur, they do is they launch their marketing way before they launch the product. Like first time founders, they always first launch the product and then they do the marketing. And I'm sure Roshan, you will be able to relate with that, right? Because like, marketing is different brain thinking compared to engineering, right? So even 6 months or 8 months before that, talk about the founder story, talk about the origin story, start a inbound engine if it means like a simple blog, right?
Build an audience.
Build an audience. So at getting to about 8K, like if you get 4 out of this 5 or 6 things that I mentioned, right, you should be able to get to about 8K. Now you can either do that in 6 months or you can do that in 36 months, right? Based on how much engineering focus you want to do, right? And these are the 4 or 5 things that I would track, and like more details I have like kind of covered in the Basecamp book. But the 100K to 1 million journey, if there is only one thing that I will tell, right? What is the difference between the 100K to 1 million journeys? Fix your pricing, right? Most people think that.
So quick question. Do you think founders underprice or overprice?
I'm yet to come up with meet a founder who has overpriced.
Yeah.
Right. So
because you're starved of customers, right? I mean, in the beginning, you're just like, hey, just use my damn product, So
absolutely,
take it for free if you want.
Yeah, take it for free if you want, right? But then, just 2 days ago, I tweeted this. Roshan, you would have seen this. As I said that every price tells a story, right? If you're cheap, it means you're scared. Right, you're scared that nobody will come and try me out. So let me sort of keep it as cheap as possible, right? If you're priced really high, you're confident and maybe even snooty in the sense that you're pricing yourself as a fashion statement, right? And if you're making it free, you're just going to load the cost somewhere else, right? Either you're going to absorb the cost yourself, or you're going to sort of steal the data and sell it to the highest bidder, right? So regardless of whether you're building B2B, B2C, right, every price that a founder sets up, it actually tells a story. Now going back to the 1 million to 10 million journey, right? The few things that we look at is, are you solving a high value problem, at least $3,000 of ACV worth? Have you communicated the value? Is it positioned right? And is your pricing aligned with the value that you have communicated, right? If you do the value-based pricing, right, that is one of the most important critical levers of growth. I have seen companies which were at 100K to 300K for 3 years, did not go anywhere because the founder was afraid to increase the price from $10 to $30. And I have seen a similar business like go from 100K to 1 million in less than 20 months because the founder was able to deliver a value which improved from $10 to $80. Right? That's literally just the one variable difference. And most people think it is sales, right? But pricing drives SaaS growth, right? So in the 0.1 to 1 million journey, I kind of look at that. But I think it might be grossly oversimplifying.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So let's unravel that a little more, right? So for sure, I mean, you have to look at value-based pricing and not cost, right? Because cost absolutely doesn't make any sense if you're selling to the world and the global market as such. What are some ways of pricing based on value? Just like a 101 on that. I mean, do you look at one mode of looking at it is, hey, 4 people spend like X amount of hours doing this one particular thing that I'm going to automate and solve for you, so you pay me some percentage of that, right? The other way of looking at it is, my product will help you get like X amount of revenue, and so pay me some percentage of that. So what are some ways for SaaS entrepreneurs to price their products based on value?
So I would say that, like, though I said pricing, but it has 2 related things that needs to be done before that. So if you can't do good pricing unless you have done good positioning, right? And before positioning, you have to really be clear about the value, right? And value means that you are having a problem brain thinking, right? So it actually starts with the problem. Most of the times, founders are only describing feature. I have this way of saying that there is a difference between feature, benefit, and value. feature is a property of a product which lies on the product. Benefit is a gain in customer's life that happens because of the property of the product. Now, value may be the same set of keywords as benefit, but value lies in the head of the customer. So feature resides on the product, benefit resides on the product designer's head or the founder's head, and value resides on the customer's head. Unless you are going to do this translation as a product person, right? You will not know what the value is. But if you know what the value is, see, the simple definition of pricing is this, Roshan. It is a number that you pick between cost and value. Right? You know your cost, but what you don't know is what is the value. Right? And if you know what is the value, then value-based pricing becomes easier. Right? Then I'll tell you that if you understand this concept, then the idea is, do you know that you should be pricing the customer and not the product? Right? We use the same water for 50 paisa on the street versus a 50 rupee bottle inside a 5-star hotel. Right? It is the same cost, right? Or maybe the cost may be marginally different, but the way it is packaged, where it is positioned, and the value that is being sold. In the street, it is quenching thirst. In a 5-star hotel, it is signaling safety. It is signaling health, saying that this has been tested and drinking this water will not cause health issues to you. And that is why somebody is paying $50. So here you're not pricing the product, right, which is the water. Here you're pricing the customer, right? And in this example, you would have noticed that the packaging plays that role, right? And this is something that has to be taken forward for software product also, because it's an experience product, right? It starts somewhere, it ends somewhere. So if you say that your standard product is going to deliver you this amount of value versus your professional product is going to deliver you this amount of value versus your enterprise product is going to deliver this amount of value, they are going to talk to different customer segment. So you have to think about pricing the customer and not the product. Then one more thing happens, right? Which is like your price, which is between the cost and the value, right? It is doing a sumo fight with your competitor's price. That's where the problem comes, right? Because your competitor is giving you a product at a different place. And that's where you have to be very careful about, are you playing in the sales intelligence software market or are you playing in account-based marketing market? Right? And if you find your positioning right and if you talk to a customer who's looking for a sales intelligence software, send him that way, as opposed to you fighting a battle in the account-based marketing kind of software. Right? So there you have to find the right positioning to be able to.
That's a fantastic point again, right? Because we've seen like a sheer explosion of categories over the last 5-10 years, I would say, so we operate roughly in the CRM, Salesforce automation market. And I remember getting on a call with one of the analysts, and, the first 5 to 10 minutes were spent with trying to slot us in one of the many categories, right? And he kept describing many categories, guided revenue, sales intelligence, etc., etc., etc. And I said, hey, I mean, we qualify some of all of what you're saying, but here is where we operate. So yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. And also, I mean, it leaves I mean, what was I going to say? It means that as a founder, you really have to understand your end customer's business really well, right? To
absolutely
figure out where that value lies. Because otherwise, the laziest thing is to just look at your competitors and say, hey, you know what, they're pricing it at about $3,000, and I'm going to say $2,995, something of that sort, right?
It's not a bad place to start, right?
It gets you started. It gets you started, of course.
Right. Most of us think about pricing only through comparables. Right. So the question really is, have you find the right competitor? Right. If you did not find the right competitor, is where you are going to do this spiraling downwards. Right. And those people who are confident about their value, they are not going to be bothered about like what the competitor's price is. Right. And if you are able to deliver the value and you know that this particular customer cares about this angle of differentiation, that they care more about that you are available when I call you at 11 a.m. in the night, and that customer support is what I'm paying for, they're going to pay that premium. Now, of course, when I have this conversation, Roshan, like a lot of people come and say, hey, that's not how Indian customers behave, and they are asking me for discount. And I go back to the first point in the Basecamp guide. I say it is easy to earn $1 than to earn a rupee.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly there's going to be more expectations if someone puts more money on the table. But so one way of solving it, I mean, one way typically what people do is just put a bunch of features in there, right? But yeah, you're right. I mean, the more confident you are in the amount of value that you're delivering, you can sort of you can peg your price at one of those numbers, right? And of course, I mean, easier said than done. But soon as you get a customer, then your confidence goes up again. So
Absolutely.
the other thing is that a lot of the times SaaS products start with a very horizontal positioning, right? So I am everything for everyone. I will solve messaging for you, for example, right? Or I will solve collaboration for you, and so on and so forth. It's a very horizontal positioning. We are also seeing this whole vertical SaaS market, right? And you could argue that Waymo sort of plays in that. Viva is a good example, right? Where you're seeing industry SaaS, vertical SaaS, and so on. Uh, can you talk about this element? Has it come up in early stage SaaS startups as such?
So I don't use the horizontal versus vertical framing as such, right? For me, everything has to be a value framing, right? And I know that the industry uses saying that I'm a horizontal SaaS versus a vertical SaaS, and I've seen this conversation more with investors saying that is a horizontal SaaS versus a vertical SaaS. See, I remember this quote, and I think I read it in Mark Anderson's blog, which is which is I think off the net right now. It's only available as PDF in some places. It says that even when you had to sell browser, you had to show people the web application on top of it, right? Right? You can't sell a browser. Browser is horizontal,
It's an
right?
arcane concept.
It's an arcane concept. How you can't even come up with a
Yeah.
good metaphor. Like
Yeah.
Steve Jobs came up with the bicycle metaphor to explain computer, right? But to do that for something like a web browser, it is going to be more harder.
Yeah.
So you have to sell the value. So the guys who were selling browser actually built web application and said that, look, this is what you can do, this is what you can feel, this is what you will get, right?
Yeah.
And that is when the value realization happens. And the newer the technology, the newer the category, the newer the concept, the more you have to demonstrate that value, right? You'll have to explain through a demo and then satisfy that latent demand, right? So like just using that framing itself, I'd say that forget SaaS. In general, like if you don't explain your horizontal technology properly, right, you won't be able to persuade or convince anyone, right? So you have, even if you're selling a horizontal, you will have to do solution selling, right? Saying that, look, this is the horizontal that I have, but you tell me your problem and I will use my tool to give you solution. So that's why I've never bought into the horizontal versus vertical, and rather prefer to use the value frame and the solution frame
No,
to explain.
that's a fair point, right? I was talking from an end use perspective, right? You better know what your end user, what a day in the life of that person is, right?
Absolutely.
And that could be extremely different based on industry, based on function, and so on and so forth, right? And
Yeah, so
match
having said
your
that, to be
solution to that person's day in the life, basically.
yeah, to be fair, I think there are some there are some differences, right? So like if you are a very commodity play, well defined category, and you are at a technology level, let's say CRM, which is like very very horizontal, right? In that, the buying purchase behaviors are different, right? If you are a complex workflow, right, like a pharma CRM or the Viva example that you gave, like the differences I would say between a horizontal and a vertical SaaS is you don't put a pricing page on a vertical SaaS software company, right? Because the buying process is going to be complicated. It is going to involve a lot of people. So you want to get in front of the customer and do a lot more understanding of what the workflow, what is the pain point that they are having in the workflow, and how a solution can go and plug holes in that, right? Versus something which is like package box, people know what they are looking for. They just are making choice between option A versus option B, CRM1 versus CRM2. There, the pricing page will have to be there, it has to stand out, it has to compete with the next best alternative. Those are all things that you will kind of change. But that, to me, for that also, the framing is commodity, well understood buying behavior, Like, how will you price it? How will you put the pricing page? How will you put the buying behavior, buying process itself, versus for something that is more complex, how would you do?
Right. Yeah, I think mm, depending on how verticalized you are, you could probably like charge a lot more, I guess, right? So
Okay.
they're less of a commodity, more of an industry solution. Uh, let's talk about something which is sort of a bad word in SaaS circles, which is services, right? Um, every founder, maybe not founders, but typically, I mean, leadership teams hate services, right? Because it just means that there's a bunch of custom work that they have to put in, and then they have to humor somebody's change requests and so on and so forth. But services can actually be a heck of a revenue stream uh, for SaaS companies, right? I mean, they can build stickiness, they can grow, they can expand your accounts, and plus, I mean, give you plenty of product ideas going forward. So, how do you view services within SaaS businesses?
So I've actually changed my view on this, and like, not the angle that you brought up, but I'll come to that angle. I talked to you about Product Nation, right? And we as a country, India, we are known for services. We've added like $350 billion of market cap to GDP to through IT services, right? So
Yeah,
we are known as we're known as this IT services nation, right? And like, the Product Nation journeys is to go from that services mindset to the product mindset, right?
right.
And there, like, we have the per hour billing mindset. And I used to think that that was the yesteryear, and like, people from that mindset cannot actually move to the product mindset.
Mm.
The last 3 years of Upekkha itself have taught me the opposite, right? What I have seen is that founders who've actually built an IT services business, they are able to become a much better value SaaS founder than founders that came from an engineering background in a product MNC, right?
Right.
Now, if you follow someone like Chetan Puttangata, he says that like, services are actually good, right?
Yeah.
Like, why I've changed my view on services in the last 3 years is like, the two of the first four startups that got to the million ARR fastest were people who came from the services. And I used to have this services DNA myth, saying that
Mm.
they can't change. Now, when somebody works in a services, they are able to gain deep domain knowledge,
Exactly.
right? And they are able to understand the problem really, really well. Now, the earlier thought process or mindset that they have is they are going to say yes to everything that the customer asks, right? All you need to tell them is like, define their boundaries of where they are going to say no,
Mm.
right? The analogy that I use is that, most of Indian products are actually built like a potter's clay, right? The services mindset is being the potter, right? So you're saying that I'm going to give you the potter away, right, for like $30 an hour, right? And he will build whatever pot or software that you're asking for.
Right.
Versus the question that you're asking is that, should I build a product or a pot for storing water, or should I build a beautiful vase that I'm going to use for some decoration somewhere? Like, the same ingredient is going to cost me 3,000, like, I can price at 3,000 rupees or
Mm.
30 rupees on the street, right? So the product conversation is that, but most of us build a product clay. But a potter is someone who's able to come to becoming a potter's clay and then say, I'm going to build customization for you. That journey is much easier and much better. And then going and saying that, look, if I only build the product, then I will be able to charge this much. Why do people like product business? People like product businesses because you can scale, you can
That has
non-linearly scale.
leverage.
That has leverage, that non-linear scale. And if you do fewer things, then you get that scale, right? But if you don't know what is going to work, it can actually start with co-creating with the customer. If you had that deep domain knowledge, if you spend 2 years just designing pod, then you will get this intuition saying that maybe I should just generate a lot of pods, and that will give me, like, a way for me to repeat this. I'm using very simple metaphors, Roshan, but this kind of plays out in the software world as well.
Yeah.
So I'm actually a big fan now of people doing services, people coming from the services background. I'm a much bigger believer right now that services founders make much better product founders, because an engineering founder that came from a product business, he will have made imaginary roadmaps,
Mm.
right? And he will think that this is
Exactly.
what is going to work, right,
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
having conversation with the customer.
Yeah.
So I think services revenue is great. Like, the question is, are you going to give a 2x or a 3x multiple if it is just a complete potter, versus are you going to give a 15x multiple? In between, if you're going to go and say, I'm going to do a combination of product as well as service and going to get a 7x or 8x multiple, I'm not going to complain.
Right. Yeah, I think it's integral to have a customer first mindset, right? Essentially, what you said, which is that charting your roadmap out of pure fiction and versus tying it to some base of reality, some base of people who might actually pay you in the future. Yeah, and the amount of things that can actually be productized. I mean, if I just look back at our roadmap itself, plenty of things that I can pick up on, which were actually customer requests that started out as customer requests, right? Okay, if we can zoom out a little bit and talk about the SaaS ecosystem itself, I often say that we're in the third startup wave in India. So if you consider the likes of Naukri and the .com startups of that era as the first wave, and then the e-commerce and consumer internet guys like Flipkart or Ola as the second wave, what we're seeing is the third wave with Freshworks, Chargebee, Waymo, Whatfix, and the likes, right? So how do you see this ecosystem coming together, and what seems to be different from how it was earlier?
So I had a view on this, which was slightly different pre-COVID, post-COVID. I'm sure, like, COVID kind of changed the thesis a lot of us have, right? But I still think that the view on SaaS or the third wave, like you said, like post-COVID, I think it is a lot more resilient as I see more. So I know you follow the work of Suresh from Kissflow, right? So they are also a great SaaS company based out of Chennai. Suresh talks about this $1 trillion SaaS nation from India, right? And his math to that is like, look, $350 billion of IT services, but it has it comes from $150 billion of revenue, which means like 1.5, 2x of multiple. Now, if that has to scale, then it has to add a lot more revenue. But at a 15x multiple, right? To go to have $1 trillion economy, you only need $66 billion company, right? Now we have a race to that. The first is Zoho and the second is Freshdesk, or first is Freshdesk and second is Zoho, right? So they'll get to the $1 billion ARR, right? Really, really quickly, right? So I'm talking about $1 billion ARR, not $1 billion valuation. Yeah. Now, the moment first company is going to hit $1 billion, Roshan, like the next one and the next one and the next one is going to happen really, really rapidly, right? And you named all of them, right? Like it is going to be Chargebee, it is going to be you, it is going to be like Whatfix, and these guys will hit there. So so Suresh's view is that to get to $1 trillion economy, we need 66. Right? So we have to wait for the first one to go, right? And the first one would have taken 10 or 11 years, right? But the next one that will happen will happen much, much faster, right? So in the next 15 to 20 years, $1 trillion economy is quite possible. Now, this is like looking into the mirror and trying to make some prediction, right? But a lot of this feels real.
So if you actually look at the Value ecosystem, that's what's happening right now, right? I mean, they're talking about decacons, right? So yeah,
absolutely, right? But since it has not happened yet, so it may look like we are having wishful thinking conversation, but it will be a matter of maybe 2 year or 4 year, maybe because of COVID a little more, for our first $1 billion ARR company to emerge. But like how people saw in sports, like after the first person broke the 6K barrier under a certain like number of seconds, the second person, the third person, the fourth person, it was much more easier for them, right? And like a lot of tailwinds are still in favor, right? The whole assisted buying. India can do both front office and back office sitting from India, right? So these are all things that are still working in favor of India, right? And we have great penchants towards software, right? I mean, this is a less known fact, like every $1 billion enterprise company based out of Bay Area has an Indian founder in it. 10 years ago, they used to have back office. Now they have both front office and back office based out of India, right? So we know how to build $1 billion ARR businesses, right? So a lot of factors are just behind this. And the beauty of this wave, Roshan, I believe, is that this is going to be a lot more sustainable. This is not the winner takes all, right? and this is not the like tide going up and only few winners, and this is going to allow lot more people to be there. So therefore, for every $1 billion ARR, there are going to be multiple 100 million ARR. For every 100 million ARR, there are going to be hundreds of 10 million ARR, right? So you are going to see a lot more Salesforce. You're going to see a lot more base camps as well from India, right? So one of our founding theses for Upekkha was that what happened in 90s with IT services is what is happening with SaaS right now.
Precisely.
Right? That it is going to have like a huge impact. So the base tailwinds are there. COVID might have created some adjustments to it, and I'm guessing that it is more helping the tailwind rather than becoming a headwind. So I'm very, very excited about the third wave, and I think it is the SaaS nation framing, and post-COVID also it seems a lot more resilient than initially looked like that.
So a couple of years back, I remember on one of those Twitter threads, I said that, India will have like, I said 10 to 15 SaaS unicorns in the next 5 years. And I got banned for that, saying that, I was being too optimistic, but I think I was not, I was being pretty conservative there, I feel. So,
right.
Yeah. So we're living in sort of exceptional times, right? I mean, it doesn't matter at this point of time whether you're in, Alabama or Alwarpet, as you said, right? Everyone's remote. So do you kind of see this as a growth movement for startups, or is it something that we just have to survive?
Are you referring to the COVID, or are you referring
current COVID market economy?
When it comes to COVID, I kind of treat this as a black swan, right? So I'm really sort of framing this from a perspective of what will it take for people to survive, right? I mean, individuals to survive. But one thing I've realized, used to be a big science fiction fan, and most of the science fiction has a very, very dystopian view, right? But if you take humanity, we've always done way better than how science fiction is painted. So I am now eternally optimistic about humanity as a whole, right? So I think we will all do well, right? It may be some people will get affected. It is because the world is just shaken up, right? And now it is a lot more luck than we thought we were in control, right? And that may make us a lot more unnerved. But overall, as a maybe as a nation, maybe as a society, as a humanity, we'll all be okay, right? So so it's more a matter of how are you able to hold your grit and you are able to deal with it and kind of move on, than getting unnerved and leading that to a downward spiral for you. And that's how I believe this will shape up.
Right. And what are some of those SaaS metrics that are extremely relevant for founders at this point of time? If they're listening, what are one or two things that they absolutely have to focus on? Churn?
They have to focus on negative churn for sure, right? One of the things in the last 3 months of metrics that we've been looking at, we noticed is that this is something unique about SaaS business, which is once you get in, it is difficult to get out. The enterprises are continue to go pay for SaaS. They may not pay service their debt, but they will service their SaaS, right? So that's great news for SaaS. Right? So they have to look at their churn, and I think founders should be, even though I said pricing is important, since people are going to take time to decide, they may have frozen things, not be very hard on price. Should be open to having the relationship, gaining the relationship, as opposed to sort of being fixed on price. So churn would be one, I would say. And then I would say as long as there is usage, right? As long there is indication of that value is being derived, right? I think that's something that founders should pay attention to. If there is no usage, then that means that somebody is going to come back and look at it and say, oh, does this make sense on, or should this go out of our expense list? So usage more than churn, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it just reinforces business fundamentals actually at this point of time, when everyone's looking at every line of their expense and thinking, whether I really need this particular software or not, or a line item or not. I mean, what value you're adding is just, something that you really have to pay attention to at this point. Uh, we're both Nassim Taleb fans. I can't let you go without asking you a few of your favorite
Absolutely.
Talebian philosophies for startups. So give us your few favorite Taleb quotes and how it's relevant for startups.
So I think the Taleb philosophy is no more true in the startup world than any other place, right? So I created this tweet thread which became a little viral.
Yeah.
So in that, like, making prediction about future by looking at the rear view mirror is something that like all of us should avoid, especially in startup, right? We only look at our past experiences and think that future is going to be based on the past experience, and that's the biggest mistakes that we
Okay,
make.
before Thanksgiving, yeah.
Right, turkey before Thanksgiving. Now, the way I've understood the Taleb book is that all the four books are related to each other, and he talks to Mother Nature and tries to find out the real, like, time-tested principles that are at work and how we should not get fooled by that. Like, how do we not get fooled by randomness? And he says that the way to do it is follow what is survived or follow what has thrived, and that will give you ideas on how to deal with randomness, right? Specifically for the startup thing, the one that I like is within anti-fragility. And I take the Taleb's idea and combine with Michael Mauboussin's idea of saying that most things in life that we have is between a skill and a luck spectrum, right? So you think about this as an x-axis, where on the leftmost side is 100% luck, 0% skill. On the rightmost side, it is 100% skill and 0% luck. Most of the things that we are doing in life is somewhere in the spectrum, right? And it is important for us to figure out the games that we are exposed to and what are the rules of the game, right? And you want to move more towards to the right side of the equation, where you are going more and more towards the skill side, but acknowledging the fact that you are more exposed to the luck part, right? And he gives the example, I think in this case Michael Mauboussin, on this entire luck spectrum, right? He gives the example of saying angel investing is more skill than luck, right? Venture investing is less skill than and more luck, right? And public market investing is more luck, right? So where you are playing, what game are you playing, and acknowledging the role of luck is very, very important. One other way I frame this for myself and also the founders that I speak to is that I think we give way too much credit for the successes that we had, and we get success bias. And the counterpoint to that is we give ourselves too much of criticism for the failures that happen. Just like how the successes did not happen because of you, the failures also did not happen because of you, right? So I've seen founders go through startup and then they're like, oh man, this did not happen and it is all because of me, right? There might be so many other factors that were outside of your control, right, that could have led to that outcome. So this whole luck skill spectrum and me wanting move more towards the game which is more skill gives me a framework to think about all the startup, and also keeps me grounded, saying that I will acknowledge for more luck while I will strive for more skill.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic way to put it. I think I heard this quote that I think it was related to angel investing on one of Nawal's podcasts. I think he said that somebody said, I think it was Startup L. Jackson who said this, that everyone who invested before me was a dart throwing monkey, and everyone who came after me are spreadsheet jockeys.
Absolutely, yes, yes, it is Startup L. Jackson.
Right. So yeah, I mean, you'll have to lie somewhere in between and move more towards the predictable end of the spectrum. Also, the fact that he talks about skin in the game, right? And skin in the game, I mean, I've applied it to many different spheres of my life, and I think the biggest what do you say? I mean, the difference has been this sort of destruction of experts, right, or pseudo experts, people who have no skin in the game, but prefer to give gyan on all kinds of things as well. And if I tie that with what Vinod Khosla says, which is one of the most important things a founder has to do is figure out who he has to listen to and on what, right? So I kind of use that skin in the game filter to in terms of who I have to listen to, right?
Absolutely. one of our design philosophy within Upekkha is that, right? So like, our overall way of operating is we work in the arena with the founder, and we win when the founder wins. That's how our business model is structured. So yeah, so in life, in business, I've used a lot of Taleb's philosophy to design like what to do, how to do things.
Yeah. So what books are you reading right now?
So recently I read this book called Stories That Stick. I found that very, very interesting. I'm also part of this small group where we meet every third Saturday and read a book. So I was forced to read a range. One of the things that I'm trying to do, thanks to like a Taleb tweet, is I'm trying to make my list of 100 books that I want to reread. So I've reread more books this year than I've read new. But these are few exceptions. Range is one. Stories That Stick is another one. One of the other books that I'm reading, which is still not finished, is Alchemy. And then the next one that I've queued up is Hell Yeah or No by Derek Sivers. So I made some rules, but I'm breaking some of them. So I do have a more list of new books to read, and picked them up in the last few weeks.
Right. And do you listen to podcasts at all?
I do, but the frequency has reduced now.
Oh, no commute.
Yeah, no commute is one of the reasons. That's
right.
Plus there is explosion. Like there is so much good content, right? And unable to decide which ones I should add into my podcast library.
Maybe you can start with this one. So
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So we're almost at the end of our episode, and it's customary to ask the guest what he or she is optimistic about moving forward, right? So Rajan, what are you optimistic about going forward?
So I'm optimistic about pretty much everything, right? I'm optimistic that
you have to be, right?
Yes. Well, you don't have to be. That there are like it's optimism versus pessimism is a belief, right? So I'm optimistic that, and I think we will, as a overall society, humanity, we will come out stronger from COVID. It'll make us go through a lot of pain. I'm optimistic that the SaaS industry will go stronger. And I'm optimistic that India as a hub for the next $1 billion SaaS companies is going to be true. I'm optimistic that there are tons of great product brands that will get created. I'm optimistic about Waymo. I'm excited about Waymo, Whatfix, ChargeBee, right? So these kind of companies which are going to build global SaaS brands from India, right? So I'm very, very optimistic. I'm rooting for Waymo. I'm rooting for all these kind of SaaS companies from India. So these are definitely the founders from here, right? We're optimistic for you, for Yamini. So all the SaaS founders, I'm very, very bullish on.
Right. Yeah, that's a fantastic note to end the podcast on. Thank you so much for making the time. This was super useful, and I think we should consider doing a SaaS series or something of that sort. There's literally a rabbit hole of things that we could have unpacked on this podcast itself.
Sure, Roshan, let's do that. And thanks for having me this podcast.
Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. The podcast will be available on Anchor, Apple, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and a bunch of other platforms. If you like this episode, then don't forget to share and subscribe. Stay safe and take care. Thank you.